At midnight, the Apache woman whispered, "What the cowboy discovered was incredibly transformative." Jake stood alone on his sprawling Arizona ranch, a silhouette against the vast starlit sky. The weight of his family legacy pressed down on him like a boulder, heavy, unyielding. As the clock struck midnight, the desert wind whispered secrets, but all Jake heard were the sounds of his own racing thoughts. Bills piled up on his cluttered kitchen table, each one a reminder of his struggle to keep the ranch afloat. Memories of generations past echoed in his mind, compelling him to harmonize their traditional ways with the relentless demands of the modern world. Yet the harder he tried to adapt, the more he felt lost, teetering on the edge of losing it all. Compromise haunted him like a phantom. Would he one day look in the mirror, only to see a man who had sacrificed his roots for fleeting success? As he paced the dirt worn by hooves through countless years, doubt intertwined with desperation, creating an ache in his chest. Just then, his gaze caught a flicker of light off in the distance, an ember glowing in the dark. Faint but persistent, like the resolve he yearned to reclaim. He followed the glow until he found Naya, an elderly Apache woman, sitting by a crackling fire. Her hands were weathered, yet they cradled the flames with a delicate grace. "What brings you here, cowboy?" she asked, her voice smooth like the desert night. "Just trying to keep my family's ranch alive," he replied, each word laced with burden. "Everything feels like it's slipping away." Naya's eyes sparkled like stars, brimming with the wisdom of ages. "Sometimes to rise, one must sink deeper into the earth." Her gaze held him captive, unraveling tales of her ancestors' struggles with endurance that mirrored his own. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Jake listened, wrapped with concern over corporate pressures encroaching on his land. Naya painted vivid imagery of the cycles of nature, sustainable practices that once thrived under the fierce Arizona sun. Anguish twisted within him as Jake grappled with the discomfort of watching those teachings fade, eclipsed by the pulse of profit-first mentality. The tension peaked when he uncovered that a corporation was set to seize control of not just his land, but the very principles he held dear. This wasn't merely a financial threat, it was a direct affront to his heritage and his identity. Each passing moment brought him closer to a decision that felt insufferably heavy. It bore the weight of generations. Would he fortify his resolve, or would he falter in the face of temptation? The cool night air contrasted sharply with the heat of his internal battle. He stood at a precipice, confronted by a choice that could shatter everything he had known. As shadows enveloped him, Jake's heart raced with the urgency of transformative resolve. The darkness whispered his lineage, beckoning him to rise and fight, not just for his family, but for a fragmented culture yearning to be reclaimed. The flicker of hope ignited deep within him, illuminating a path yet untraveled. Can he bridge the ancient teachings with modern realities, or will the sacrifice he faces be too great? Naya's words hung in the thick air, reverberating like hammer strikes on iron. Jake felt a surge of determination coupled with an overwhelming fear of failure clawing at him. He needed to reclaim not just the land, but the very fabric of who he was, a guardian of his legacy, anchored in the teachings of the past. But how could he achieve that under the looming threat of corporate encroachment? He sat by Naya's fire, letting the warmth seep into his aching bones, each crackle of the flames echoing the battle within. The notion of returning to the earth felt both exhilarating and terrifying. What did it mean to sink deeper? He pondered this as memories of his grandfather teaching him the old ways of farming and livestock management surfaced. Those lessons hadn't been mere survival tactics. They'd been a way of life rooted in respect for the land. "You can choose a different path, you know," Naya said, pulling him from his reverie. "You don't have to follow the flow of those who don't cherish your heritage. Find a method that honors your ancestors but speaks to the now." Jake nodded, absorbing her every word while his mind churned through possibilities. He had always relied on traditional ranching methods, but perhaps it was time to innovate, integrating sustainable practices that not only preserved the land, but made it valuable in a world obsessed with profits. The idea electrified his thoughts. Solar panels for water pumps, rotational grazing to rejuvenate the land, and organic farming techniques. Yet doubt slithered back into his consciousness. What if the changes weren't enough? What if the corporations had already stacked the deck too high in their favor? Plagued by these worries, he clenched his fists, frustration boiling under the surface. He needed more than ideas. He needed a plan. "Face your fear," Naya urged gently. "The actions we take shape our reality. You have the power to rewrite your story." Her words ignited a spark, casting light on his fears and transforming them into fuel for action. She saw his potential and the strength that lay hidden beneath layers of doubt. Fueled by newfound resolve, he formulated a strategy. Jake envisioned a community meeting, a gathering of ranchers and local farmers committed to preserving the shared identity of their land. It would be an opportunity to harness collective knowledge and resources in opposing outside interests. He visualized collaboration, innovative workshops, and shared labor enhancing their common cause. As dawn broke, the first rays illuminated the horizon, illuminating a canvas of possibilities. Jake felt alive with determination. This wasn't merely about walls closing in on him. It was about opening doors to new pathways. He could lead with integrity, champion sustainable practices while honoring the traditions of his forefathers. He stood, drawing in deep breaths of morning air, his heart pounding with revitalization. Each heartbeat resonated with courage, belief solidifying within him. This was only the beginning. Would others stand with him, ready to fight for their shared heritage? Determination swelled within him, a steady pulse urging him forward. But as he turned to leave the fire's warmth, a chilling thought caught in his throat. Would their combined strengths be enough to confront the corporation's powerful machinery? The weight of this unresolved question sank deep, a challenge laid bare. His next move would chart the course for not just his future, but a future that dictated the survival of his legacy. And as he ambled back toward his ranch, Jake couldn't shake the growing realization that the time had come to face not only external obstacles, but also the fears locked within himself. Would he have the courage to confront the corporate threat head-on? Or would doubt silence the very innovations that could save his family's legacy? As Jake approached his ranch, the weight of Naya's words settled heavily on his shoulders. He knew he had to do something radical to reclaim not just the land, but also an essence of himself he had nearly forgotten in the grind of routine. He stepped into the barn, compelled by the familiar scent of leather and hay, as memories flooded back. Long afternoons spent repairing fences, the wind whispering sagebrush tales into his ears. But these cherished remembrances were now marred by fears of a future that seemed ripe with corporate greed. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremors of uncertainty that threatened to cloud his thinking. By the rustic wooden table where they used to plan their seasonal crops, Jake began organizing his thoughts, methodically jotting down ideas that had come alive by the fire. For an hour, he scribbled notes until the paper was cluttered with plans for solar energy, organic methods, and rotational grazing. Suddenly, the distinct creaking of the barn's door interrupted his focus. His younger sister, Eliana, sauntered in. Unlike Jake, she had always been drawn to the arts over the ranching life. Seeing her made him realize he needed to communicate his vision, not just to her, but to the entire family. "Hey, what's all this?" she asked, curiosity dancing in her bright green eyes as she leaned over his disheveled notes. Jake hesitated. "I'm thinking of changing things up around here. You know, making the ranch sustainable." Eliana's brow furrowed in thought. "That's a big undertaking. What about Dad? How does he feel about it?" The mention of their father made Jake feel the growing tension within. "I don't know, and honestly, I'm terrified to bring it up. He's stubborn about the way things have always been done, but we're risking everything if we don't adapt." Eliana pulled out a chair and took a seat across from him, a thoughtful look on her face. "People are resistant to change, Jake. But what if you presented it from a perspective he respects? Perhaps frame it as a tribute to Grandpa?" The idea struck him like a lightning bolt. Instead of confrontation, he could steer the conversation towards honoring their family's legacy. He would show him that innovation and tradition weren't mutually exclusive. Maybe I could host a family meeting, Jake said slowly, contemplating the enormity of such an act. Get everyone on board. If we frame it around our roots, it might ease Dad in. Then let's work it together, Eliana offered, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to the doubts that had been lurking inside him. You need a strategy, a plan that feels both fresh and respectful. Jake's mind raced with the newfound collaborative effort. They would gather photos and stories, reminding everyone of their grandfather's dreams for the land. Then, they could paint a picture of progress built on those very foundations. As they discussed ideas, a shift occurred within Jake. Here was a moment of empowerment, not just creating a plan for growth, but also leveraging familial ties to bridge the gap between the old and the new. He realized that sharing his vision would not only promote solidarity, but illuminate a path that felt both brave and deeply rooted in tradition. Let's meet after dinner, he suggested, a confident glint in his eye. I want us to go over it together, make sure everyone feels part of this transition. As they finished their brainstorming session, Jake felt that familiar pulse of resolve thrumming beneath his skin. This wasn't just about defending what was, it was about redefining it. Yet, even amidst this surge of vigor, a nagging voice questioned whether the family, especially his father, would embrace these changes. Would he see a son willing to not only uphold their heritage but also innovate upon it? Determined to confront this perceived obstacle, Jake knew he'd soon face the hardest conversation yet. With each step toward the house, he could feel the emotional weight pressing down on his heart, the challenge ahead looming larger than any corporate threat. And as the evening sky turned dusky, the thought loomed. Would he rise to the occasion, shaping his family's legacy? Or would he falter and let fear dictate his path? Jake sat at the kitchen table in the dim light, the scent of dinner wafting in from the stove. He stared at the notes scattered in front of him, feeling the enthusiasm of earlier visions begin to erode under the weight of dread. Eliana was bustling around, setting the table, unbothered by the gravity of the task they had ahead. The gap felt palpable, as if a chasm stood between his ambition and family acceptance. He looked at his sister, her fingers deftly arranging the silverware, and felt a swell of gratitude for her support. Yet the softness of her encouragement felt insufficient when he imagined his father's possible reaction. It wasn't just tradition at stake, it was a legacy that had shaped their identities. What chance did he truly have to convince his father, a man settled like stone, resistant to the very idea of evolution? The sound of footsteps made Jake glance up to see his father, Thomas, moving in from the porch. His sun-weathered skin bore the marks of years toiling in the fields, and his gaze was a mixture of weariness and resolute strength. The incoming meal was a ritual, a practice rooted in family and old ways, the very essence that Jake now aimed to challenge. As Thomas took his seat, Jake felt his heart hammering against his ribs, wishing he could turn back time to a simpler life before this impending confrontation. The conversation around the table felt like a trap, strung tightly by expectations and old grievances. "Dinner's ready," Eliana announced, laying the last plate down. The clanking of ceramic broke Jake's thoughts, pulling him into the present. They began to eat, conversation ebbing and flowing around the table like the currents of the wind outside. Jake participated politely, but his mind was already racing ahead, formulating plans, rehearsing lines for the conversation he dreaded the most. Finally, after finishing his meal, Jake cleared his throat, the noise resonating through the room like a shattering glass. "Dad," he began, sensing his sister lean in, ready to lend her support. "I want to talk about the ranch and some ideas I've been thinking about." The way his father's fork halted mid-motion told him he had their attention. Eliana's face lit with that eager glow as she sensed the shift. Jake, however, couldn't mask his tension. "What do you mean, ideas?" Thomas pressed, his brows knitting together in curiosity and concern. Jake took a steadying breath, determined to embody the conviction he had tapped into earlier. "I think we need to adapt. We should explore sustainable farming methods, solar energy, organic crops, rotational grazing, all of it. If we do nothing, we risk losing what Grandma and Grandpa built." Thomas set his fork down and met his son's gaze, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched thin, practically humming with unspoken responses. Jake felt every beat of his pulse, warm and alive with anxiety. "I respect your heart, son," Thomas finally said, the weight of his words heavy enough to crush doubts. but you know the way we do things has kept us whole. How can you think we need to change? Jake had anticipated resistance, but facing it stripped away the surface level of his plans, revealing the raw core of his motivations. Because keeping things the way they are won't sustain us for the future, he countered, forcing the words through a throat tight with apprehension. We need to build on our legacy, not let it wither beneath the pressures of modernity. The room shifted, the air alive with tension. Eliana's hand reached out to squeeze Jake's, a tiny gesture that ignited a flicker of courage within him. He had taken the first step, and suddenly everything felt more visceral. The stakes had risen. Would the courage he summoned hold up against his father's formidable sense of duty? Well, Thomas began slowly, each word carefully chosen, as though he were weighing the implications. What does this mean for the way we do things now? Jake straightened, emboldened by the opening. It was more than just his father's approval he sought. It was clarity in their roles moving forward. I want to find a path that connects our past with a sustainable future. We can honor Grandpa in ways that also prepare us for the unforeseen. The conversation hung on a precipice, the outcome uncertain and fraught with possibility. Jake knew he had opened a door, but whether they would all step through it remained to be seen. As Thomas considered Jake's words, a new reality dawned on him, the consequences of stagnation overshadowed by the courage to innovate. Jake waited for a response, bracing himself against every potential rejection that could dash his hopes. But just as his father began to speak, a loud crash interrupted them, a haunting sound echoing from the barn. A ripple of anxiety swept through Jake. What if this was a sign? What if the very foundation of what he hoped to achieve was already crumbling around him? Suddenly, he felt the weight of uncertainty creep back, heavier than before as he locked eyes with Eliana, both knowing they had to confront whatever awaited them outside. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for not just the issues at the ranch, but also the revelations that loomed just beyond their doorstep. What awaited them, they had yet to discover. But one thing was certain. The battle for the future had only just begun. Jake's heart raced as he pushed back his chair, the quiet creak echoing the sudden urgency coursing through him. His father and sister followed suit, apprehension etched on their faces. The crash outside felt ominous, resonating as a dark riddle that demanded his attention now more than ever. With each step toward the barn, uncertainty clawed at him. It wasn't just the possibility of a mess or an animal escape. It was a confrontation with change, its breath hot on his neck. As he hitched open the barn door, the musty scent enveloped him, mingling with the raw essence of hay and earth. The inside lay cloaked in shadows, faintly illuminated by the moon trickling through the gaps in the boards. Instinctively, Jake reached for the nearest light switch, flooding the barn with an amber glow, and then he froze. His gaze fell upon the scene before him. A toppled hay bale lay sprawled on the ground. But more disturbing was the sight of his father's prize stallion, Midnight, thrashing against the confines of his stall, clearly agitated. Jake's mind raced with questions. How had the stallion gotten so worked up? Had it sensed something? "Help me!" Eliana's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to see her struggle to right the fallen bale, determination etched across her features. Thomas stepped in, his weathered hands moving with practiced grace, a stark contrast to Jake's stillness. Conflicted emotions churned within him as he stepped back, observing the fluid choreography of his father and sister at work. For years, he had been the one on the sidelines, an observer of their routine rather than a participant. It struck him that each action they took not only addressed the immediate crisis, but also demonstrated their deep connection to the land and the animals. It was a bond built on trust, not just between them and the livestock, but between the past and the future. In that moment, he felt a haunting realization. It was his bond to the legacy, one he so desperately wanted to innovate, that was now calling him to engage more deeply. Working alongside Eliana, hefting the hay to its rightful place in the stall, he felt layers of past grievances and frustrations begin to peel away, revealing a raw impulse to connect. Each strain in his muscles mirrored his internal struggle. Should he cling tightly to his vision of the future, or embrace the lessons found in traditions no longer convenient? "You have to approach him calm and steady," Thomas instructed, his voice breaking the rhythm of Jake's thoughts. The stallion's dark eyes reflected an intelligence and a challenge. How do I do that? Jake questioned, the words tumbling forth, driven by an urgency to understand. You need to listen, Thomas replied, a glint of pride sparking in his gaze. Animals respond to energy. If you want to work with them rather than against them, you have to find your balance. Jake took a deep breath, centering himself as he approached Midnight's stall. Echoing the steadiness his father exuded, he slowed his heartbeat, focusing, calculating. Just as he reached out, he paused, considering every shift of energy, the fear, the uncertainty swirling together. In that moment, he realized his dreams for the ranch were less about dictating what should change and more about what had to remain. And then it happened. Midnight, sensing Jake's newfound resolve, nudged against his hand, leaning in as if inviting him to define their relationship not just as horse and rider, but as partners in their shared land. Eliana watched, her eyes glossy with understanding and pride, as Jake felt a quiet strength forming inside him. He wasn't merely advocating for change, he was claiming a rightful place within their family's legacy. The thought surged forward, illuminating his path. This was more than just agricultural innovation, it was the blending of respect for what had come before with a vision for what lay ahead. But the barn still brimmed with unease. Jake sensed a lingering tension, shadows of doubt that clung to his ambitions. As they worked to calm Midnight, he knew this confrontation was only the beginning. Suddenly, a cacophony erupted outside, a cacophony that pulled them all from the moment. Turning towards the barn door, Jake felt the urge to explore crop up within him. If something was stirring outside, it might just connect to the uncertainties he now faced. What awaited beyond the barn door would test not only his courage, but fundamentally redefine what it meant to bridge the past with the future. His family's legacy riding on the precipice of what lay just beyond the threshold. Jake steeled himself as he stepped outside, instinctively scanning the yard, where shadows twisted in response to errant moonlight. The crash had come not from the barn, but from the orchard bordering the property, a place where he had spent countless hours dreaming about the future. As he made his way toward the sound, adrenaline coursed through his veins, urging him forward and shaking off lingering doubt. Every footfall on the gravel path heightened his awareness. He could hear Eliana and Thomas following closely behind, their breaths coming quick with a mix of concern for him and curiosity about what had disturbed the night. But it was Jake's own heartbeat that resonated in his ears, a metronome ticking inexorably towards some reckoning. When he reached the perimeter of the orchard, the chaotic topple of fallen branches greeted him, illuminated by the faint glow of the barn's light spilling through the doorway. A tempest in the trees had been unleashed, and debris lay scattered like a puzzle that begged to be assembled. "What happened?" Jake murmured, kneeling beside a twisted limb. Eliana caught up, her eyes wide as she took in the mess. "Looks like the storm last night caused this," she concluded, scanning the fallen messes that promised a long night of work ahead. "We should start clearing it. The horses' area is just on the other side." Jake looked up at her, feeling an odd sense of calm wash over him. It was a challenge, but not just one of physical labor. This was a chance to confront his uncertainty, to meld the tradition of manual work with his yearning for innovation. It didn't have to be one or the other. He could forge a new path while respecting the old. "Let's do it," he said, surprising even himself with the resolve that leapt from his lips. The three of them began to gather branches, working in a rhythm that reminded Jake of their efforts with Midnight. The task was repetitive yet grounding, each branch lifted becoming a small victory against the chaotic remnants of nature's fury. However, amid the labor, doubts returned, creeping like fog across his mind. Was this really the future he envisioned? "Why do you want to make changes here, Jake?" Eliana asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled around them. "What's driving you? It feels like you're not just in it for yourself." Her question was piercing, and he hesitated, the weight of her words dislodging his internal dialogue. What was pushing him forward? He had always been a dreamer, content in abstract visions, but now he sensed a deeper urgency, a need to assert himself, to claim agency in a legacy that felt both exhilarating and suffocating. "I want to honor what our family built, while also recognizing there's more we can do," he replied finally, his voice steadier than he felt. "I think we can integrate technology in a way that respects tradition, just like with Midnight." Eliana nodded thoughtfully, and Thomas paused his work, looking at Jake with renewed admiration. Each of them had their own journey, and in this moment of labor, a shared commitment began to surface. Within the growing intensity of their effort, the night air surged with potential. As their work to clear the debris advanced, Jake felt something shift within him. It was a blend of determination and newfound possibility, a realization that pain and progress were dancing partners in his quest for growth. But just as he felt that exhilaration, a rustling in the underbrush caught his attention, sending a galvanizing chill up his spine. Something stirred, and it was close. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, heartbeat quickening again. The cacophony of nature felt suddenly alive, like an unseen force tugging at the edges of his resolve. They were not alone in the orchard. This shift toward the unknown promised clarity but beckoned danger, drawing Jake deeper into a night filled with tension and transformation. As the mystery loomed and shadows flickered, he realized he was on the precipice of embracing the full complexity of his legacy, and the coming revelation could prove anything but predictable. Jake's heart raced as the rustling intensified, a cacophony that shattered the fragile atmosphere they had just been forging amidst the debris. Each sound felt amplified, reverberating in his chest like a warning bell. He instinctively shifted closer to Eliana and Thomas, a hint of protective instinct coursing through him, even as he also craved the confrontation. "What if it's just an animal?" Thomas suggested, though his tone betrayed a sliver of uncertainty. Jake could see the doubt etched in his friend's expression, mirroring his own internal conflict. An animal could be harmless or threatening. It could pave the way for a narrative he wasn't prepared to write. Staring into the shadows of the underbrush, the blend of fear and curiosity ignited a fire in Jake. He was teetering on a brink, much like the branches they had just been clearing, poised to fall or take root. This situation demanded more than just physical strength. It called for courage, clarity, and a choice to confront what loomed in the dark. "Let me check it out," Jake declared, surprising not only Eliana and Thomas but himself as well. The moment he spoke, the weight of his words settled on him like heavy boots. It was a moment that could define the path he had begun to carve. After a pause, Eliana's eyes narrowed. "Let's be careful. You need us with you." With a reluctant nod, Jake agreed. He wanted the companionship, the bond that had started to solidify just moments before. Yet he also felt the suffocating weight of uncertainty that urged him to act alone, to assert himself in a world that had begun to feel too expansive, too uncontrollable. Together, they stepped closer toward the sound, cautious and tense, their movements synchronized. The air was thick with anticipation, amplifying every snap of a twig underfoot. As they stepped further into the orchard, the moonlight illuminated the chaos of the night. It revealed the stark contrast between the beautiful, proud trees that once flourished and the mess of nature's recent wrath. Suddenly, the rustling ceased. An eerie stillness settled like the eye of a storm, pregnant with potential catastrophe. Jake felt an odd mixture of disappointment and relief. The confrontation was waiting. The confrontation that would force him to examine not just his fears, but perhaps his motivations that stirred under the surface of his desires. "Should we turn back?" Thomas asked quietly, uncertainty lacing his voice. "No," Jake stated firmly, reveling in his newfound clarity. "I need to know." With that, they advanced deeper, plunging into the unknown. Just as the moon dipped behind a cloud, casting the orchard into darkness, something moved in the shadows, a figure emerging with a presence both powerful and inexplicable. "Jake!" Eliana whispered nervously, eyes wide with apprehension. It was then Jake felt a surge of something raw and instinctual, a pulse that resonated from the depths of his being. This figure represented everything he wrestled with, his need for innovation clashing against a legacy steeped in tradition. The embodiment of the unknown, standing just ahead, beckoned him to redefine his narrative. "What do you want?" Jake called into the dark, voice steady, though his heart drummed wildly in his chest. As the figure turned, shadows shifted to reveal a familiar face etched in time, a woman clad in an array of colors that reflected an aura he couldn't quite grasp, yet recognized all too well. Jake had come to face a challenge greater than fallen branches and storms. He was staring into the very face of what defined his evolution and the conflict within the core of his identity. The moment surged with the heat of intertwined destinies, igniting a need for transformation that could unravel the very fabric of his legacy. Here, under the watchful night, Jake would either confront or retreat, opening the door to revelations he had barely begun to imagine. And in that moment, Jake realized he had crossed the threshold into a realm where he would either affirm his place or redefine what it meant to belong. The looming tension unfurled like the branches of the trees around him, suggesting that what lay ahead would be anything but ordinary, sparking something in him that intuitively promised change. "What if I told you the world you seek is not as far as you think?" the figure whispered, her voice weaving between the branches like a haunting melody. Jake's breath caught as the weight of her words sunk in. This was the moment he had been unknowingly preparing for. What awaited them could transform everything he believed about his past and future. The question hung in the air, wrapping around him like the vines of the orchard as he braced himself for what would come next. Would he embrace this chance to learn, to grow, in a direction he had yet to fully comprehend? Jake stood poised at the edge of uncertainty, the weight of the woman's words heavy in the night air. The tension coiled like a spring in his gut. He could feel the pulse of something significant brewing between them. This was more than just a chance encounter in the orchard. It was a summons to peel back layers of his identity he had long concealed. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, forcing his voice to sound steady, despite the storm of questions screaming within him. Just behind him, Thomas shifted nervously, while Eliana's breath seemed to hitch in anticipation. The woman smiled, an enigmatic blend of warmth and challenge in her expression. "I am a reflection of the paths you can take, the choices that define you. You've stood in the shadow of the past for too long, Jake. It's time to step into the light." Her declaration ignited a flicker of defiance in his chest. The notion of merely existing in someone else's legacy was a concept he had wrestled with for years. His father's expectations loomed like a specter, suffocating his ambitions and desires. Yet here was a figure in the dark, embodying the rebellion that teetered on the edges of his consciousness. "What do you know about what I want?" he asked, the edge of accusation creeping into his tone. It felt reckless, yet liberating. The woman's expression remained unfazed. "I know you want to break free from tradition, to seek innovation that resonates with your genuine self, but you also fear the unknown." There was an eerie calmness in her revelations, striking chords of truth he had yet to fully confront. Her words coursed through him, unveiling hidden layers of introspection and self-realization. In that instant, Jake felt stripped bare, stripped of the wallpaper of his upbringing and the societal expectations alive in his veins. He was being challenged to confront not just his desires, but the fears that inevitably accompanied them. "Face what you're afraid of," she prompted softly. "It can be the key to unlocking the potential that lies dormant within you. The world you seek lies in embracing both innovation and legacy. You can honor what was while crafting what will be." The dialogue echoed the internal conflict Jake had grappled with since adolescence. Would pursuing his vision violate the memory of his father's ideals? Was it possible to breathe new life into his family's tradition without betraying it entirely? He glanced at Eliana and Thomas, their support tangible, yet imbuing a sense of weight to his decision. They didn't just stand behind him, they believed in him. The burden of expectation merged with the liberating force of possibility, igniting an urgency to act. "Tell me more," he urged, grounding himself as he leaned into the confrontation. There was a newfound resolve in his posture, a desire to uncover the intricacies of his own potential. "You need to experience it for yourself," the woman replied, stepping back slightly to allow space. "Follow me. The orchard holds the answers you seek, but it requires a journey into the depths of your own fears." Instinctively, Jake felt the slight tremor of hesitancy creep back into his mind, but he quickly quashed it. This was not just about facing the unknown, it was an opportunity for transformation. His heart pounded, a blend of thrill and fear coursing through him. "Are you coming?" the woman called, her voice guiding him like a beacon, yet reminding him of the path ahead that would challenge every sense of stability he thought he understood. He turned to look at Eliana and Thomas, a silent conversation of solidarity passing between them. Their presence bolstered him, offering a bridge he could traverse into unimagined territory. "I'll go," he stated firmly, bracing himself for what lay beyond the shadows. As they followed her deeper into the orchard, each step felt like a choice. The choice to embrace his authentic self against the whispers of legacy that had long dictated his narrative. Would he emerge transformed or consumed? The question lingered in the air, thick like the mist wrapping around the orchard trees. Just as they entered a clearing bathed in pale moonlight, Jake felt the weight of expectation shift. Here, surrounded by the very fabric of the choice that lay ahead, he sensed that something was about to reshape the contours of his future. "Remember," the woman said, glancing back at him, "to confront is to learn. Each step forward is a step toward understanding who you truly are." Jake nodded, heart racing, ready to uncover the clues that would guide him through the dark. But little did he know, the deeper he ventured, the more the echoes of his past would collide with the future he yearned to create. What awaited them at the center of the orchard would redefine everything he thought he knew. Would he have the courage to seize the moment when it arrived? The air shifted as Jake stepped into the clearing, the moon casting an ethereal glow across the landscape. He felt different here, unencumbered by the weight of expectations beyond the orchard's boundary. The woman stood in the center, her presence commanding yet inviting, as if she understood the turmoil that roiled within him. "Here," she gestured to the ground, "is where you will begin to untangle the threads of your fears. What lies beneath the surface can only be revealed through confrontation." Her eyes held an intensity that urged him to dig deeper into the murky waters of his psyche. Jake hesitated. Would uncovering his fears truly liberate him, or would it simply unveil the chaos he feared facing? Just as he began to doubt himself, Eliana's hand clasped his shoulder, grounding his spiraling thoughts. Jake looked to her, and in her steady gaze, he found a reservoir of strength, an unspoken encouragement. "Think of something that frightens you most," the woman's voice transformed, taking on a rhythmic quality, almost hypnotic. "Visualize it, feel its weight. You must not turn away." The words wrapped around him, tightening like a vine. Jake inhaled sharply, an image of his father's disappointed face flooding his mind, a lingering shadow threatening to stifle his aspirations. I fear disappointing him," he murmured, reluctantly admitting the sentiment that had haunted him for years. The acknowledgement felt both liberating and suffocating. "Why?" the woman prompted, her voice soft yet piercing. "What is it that you believe will happen if you step out of his shadow?" Jake clenched his fists. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to preserve the family business. But those footsteps are not mine to take. It was a moment of clarity, unveiled but still raw. The years of pressure cracked open, revealing the necessity of honoring his own path. "Good," the woman nodded, her expression shifting to one of understanding. "You have the strength to honor legacy while forging your identity. Now embrace that fear. What can be shifted in your perspective?" A wave of anger mixed with resolve surged through him. Embracing fear didn't mean succumbing to it. It meant acknowledging its presence and choosing to act anyway. "I won't be held back any longer. I want to innovate, to create something that carries my voice." At that, the moonlight brightened, an unseen spotlight honing in on Jake as if acknowledging his revelation. There was a charge in the air, an exhilarating rush that propelling him forward. "Now, reflect this truth," the woman continued, her presence amplifying the energy around them. "Let it vibrate through you. What will you choose next?" Jake breathed deeply, releasing the lingering doubts with each exhale. "I will take steps to reinvent what's expected of me, not just create to please others, but to build something genuinely mine." As the words escaped his lips, the orchard seemed to respond. The air crackled, and for a fleeting second, Jake found utter clarity. Yet beneath that clarity loomed new uncertainty. Satisfaction felt close but elusive. The question remained, was he prepared for the journey ahead? A path that would demand more from him than mere defiance? "Challenge awaits, Jake," the woman cautioned, taking a step back. "The consequences of your choice ripple far beyond this moment. Are you certain?" He nodded, conviction solidifying within him. The prospect of carving his future felt daunting, yet exhilarating. Every step forward would demand both courage and creativity. But internally, Jake wrestled with a deeper, unsettling awareness. If he rejected the familiar, what was he truly stepping into? Could he bear the possibility of estrangement from the very legacy he'd resented all this time? The woman's gaze studied him, as if reading the tumult beneath his surface. Your journey is but beginning. Are you ready to dive deeper into the unknown? That question pierced through the newfound confidence he wore like armor. The path he ventured toward was fraught with not just choice but risk. Would he shoulder the burden of legacy while still forging a vibrant identity? Before he could respond, the atmosphere shifted once again. Shadows circulated just outside the clearing, dark shapes that demanded his attention. Jake felt his breath catch. What emerged from those darkened corners would test everything he'd just acknowledged. The moment loomed, charged with uncertainty, ready to reveal what he had yet to confront. Would he meet this new challenge head-on, or retreat into the safety of the old? The answer awaited him in the depths of the shadows, and with each heartbeat, Jake knew he would have to decide what to unleash or what to let die once and for all. As Jake stood among the vibrant shadows of the orchard, he felt as if the world had expanded around him, inviting him into its depths. The unknown beckoned tantalizingly, yet anxiety clawed at the edges of his determination. With each breath, he sensed the presence of both courage and fear. Two equally potent forces that coexisted within him, nudging him toward a pivotal crossroads. In that charged moment, the dim outline of a figure emerged from the shadows, the embodiment of his fears and unresolved conflicts. As the moonlight illuminated the scene, Jake realized this wasn't just an external challenge. It reflected his deepest uncertainties. The struggle to preserve his family's legacy while carving out his individual identity. It was the very essence of the battle he had faced since standing at the edge of that ranch so many nights ago. "Who are you?" he called out, resolve anchoring his voice despite the tumult of apprehension swirling inside. "I am the manifestation of what lies ahead, the uncertainties you must confront," the figure replied, a haunting familiarity to its cryptic demeanor. "Here, your choices shape not only your destiny, but that of the legacy left behind." In that moment, clarity began to unfurl within him. He wasn't just standing at the precipice of change, he was ready to dive in. The fear that had long consumed him, holding him captive to outdated traditions, was nothing compared to the ambition now sparking within him. It was time to confront it all head-on. Jake took a step forward, channeling the fearless energy coursing through him. "I refuse to be a bystander in my own life. I want to innovate and create while still honoring what has come before. I want to embrace tradition and modernity as partners, not adversaries." The figure hesitated, its uncertainty mirroring the internal struggle Jake had faced for too long. "Then you must choose to stand for what you believe in, Jake. This is more than individual courage, it's about continuous evolution. To harness the essence of innovation while upholding the values of your heritage." With steadfastness, Jake nodded. This intersection, where the past coalesced with the future, was his to define, and he would approach it with both reverence and conviction. He felt the warmth of something new stirring within him, the realization that legacy wasn't merely meant to be preserved, it was to be actively cultivated and nurtured. "Are you ready to take steps toward your story?" the figure asked, a glimmer of understanding lighting its features. "I am ready," Jake declared firmly, feeling the fervor of possibility thrumming in his veins. There was no turning back. Each step he took toward confronting his fears would ultimately lead him to what he desired. A ranch that demonstrated the beauty of blending innovative practices with rich traditions. Yet the figure continued to loom, a reminder that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. With courage comes sacrifice. You must be prepared to let go of the security that once bound you. Jake took a deep breath, absorbing the weight of those words. He recalled his conversations with Eliana, the weight of his father's expectations, and the struggle he'd faced in reconciling the two. This was more than merely addressing internal fears. It was a commitment to redefining his narrative. "I am willing to let go. I understand that true growth lies in vulnerability," he responded, the conviction deepening in his chest. The figure regarded him solemnly, and in the stillness that followed, a profound shift occurred. The shadows seemed to retreat, yielding to the strength he exuded. "Then step forward, Jake. Embrace the challenge ahead, and you will discover what must be reclaimed." With each step, Jake felt fortified. The fear that had once left him paralyzed now felt like a guide, illuminating the complexity of the reality he had shunned. This was not merely about standing tall against corporate pressures. It was about aligning with his authentic self, eager to create a legacy that honored family while embracing modernity. Emerging from the depths of his confrontation, Jake strode forward into the new dawn, confident, competent, and resolute. He would not merely protect the land, he would redefine it, turning every challenge into an opportunity. And as the first rays of sunlight broke through the horizon, illuminating the orchard in a golden hue, Jake embraced the promise of transformation, determined to weave together the rich tapestry of his past with the vibrant fabric of a future he was proud to call his own. This was his moment of revelation, his stepping stone toward impact and purpose. After all, he was not just reclaiming a ranch, he was reclaiming himself. Now, as he stood firm in his resolve, the journey had just begun, and Jake was ready to face whatever came next. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.